So the Alabama Supreme Court's ruling that frozen embryos are considered children, that's already having wide-ranging implications, not only for people trying to become parents, but also for in vitro fertilization clinics. In fact, the University of Alabama health system has already paused its IVF treatments, fearing possible persecution after the ruling. So we want to talk about this today for a few minutes. We have the Chief Advocacy and Policy Officer, Sean Tipton, from the American Society for Reproductive Medicine. And we're also joined by Dr. Natalie Crawford, who's a double board-certified fertility doctor, co-founder of the Fora Fertility Clinic. Welcome both. Sean, let me start with you, because just on the big picture on this, I think people thought when Roe v. Wade was overturned, what's the fallout? They're trying to think, what would the other impacts of that decision be? And is this what we're going to see?
Well, we had hoped it wouldn't be, but we certainly knew that in the Dobbs decision, the Supreme Court removed an essential civil rights protection and took away the guarantee that Americans could make their own decisions about their own reproductive lives. Now, we immediately saw that impact in terms of pregnancy termination, and now, unfortunately, we're seeing its impact as their efforts to go after contraception, to go after medical abortion, and now finally to go after infertility care as well.
Well, let's talk about IVF then, Dr. Crawford, a little bit. So now that this ruling is in place, we mentioned this one clinic that says, you know what, we're out of that business now because we're afraid of what's going to happen. Is it possible in a state like Alabama that has a ruling like this to go forward with in vitro fertilization, or because you can't discard of these unused embryos anymore, you can't destroy them, that it's just not feasible to even have the treatment at all?
Connell, I think that's a great question. And it's more than just, can you discard them or can you get rid of them? The real issue here is that if an embryo, which is at a very, very early stage of development, let's remember that an egg is fertilized with sperm in the IVF lab. It usually grows to a day 5 or 6 in development, and then it can be transferred back in the body. But modern technology is actually to freeze the embryos, find out which one is the healthiest, do genetic testing, place that one back, and then keep the others frozen until either a subsequent attempt or a future pregnancy. And so we're really worried about, can you do any of those things if embryos are children? Can you freeze them, biopsy them? So it's not just the disposition of embryos, but it's the entire act of creating them, freezing them, testing them. And I think that right now the fear is that being ruled as a minor, as a child, is causing clinics to be concerned about liability. And I think that that is an understandable concern at the moment, but it's really tragic for our community, for infertility patients. IVF is actually relatively common. 2% of births in the U.S. are from in vitro fertilization. So this technology helps people have families.
Well, this is even wider ranging, I think, Dr. Crawford, than I even realized that it was myself, because I did, you're talking about more than I was just thinking about freezing the embryos, which, by the way, is costly, right? I don't know if you know, but for many of these clinics, and Sean probably knows this as well, but Dr. Crawford, you first, that's just a really costly process.
It's costly for the patient to go through it, and then even as somebody who owns the clinic, already having the technology and the safety measures, the liability insurance as it stands without a ruling like this, already makes it really cost prohibitive for a lot of patients to go through. So if clinics are going to stay open, I would presume they're going to have to raise their costs to cover some of these other things that they're going to have to do, which will make IVF care even more hard. It'll be less accessible for the average person.
Less accessible, that's the problem. Sean, your organization, what's next? I mean, what do you do? First of all, I guess, what are you worried about? We know what's happening here. What could this lead to? Would there be more coming in other states that you might be worried about? And what's the work of your organization from here on out? What's your next step?
Well, we're worried about patients being able to get the care that they need, and worried about politicians putting themselves between our member physicians and their patients. So physicians like Dr. Crawford all over the country are wondering what's next. Physicians in Alabama are still wondering what's next because, unfortunately, the court case left many, many questions unanswered. Now, in terms of what's next, I think there is some appellate process still to play out. The legislature of Alabama could step up and do the right thing and fix this so that the citizens of Alabama can still access the best cutting-edge reproductive care available, which they right now can get in Alabama. Next week, maybe not. And we do worry about contagion effects. I mean, the reality is there are anti-choice politicians who have banned abortion a couple times, but they want to keep those campaign contributions rolling in. So they got to keep doing something. And I'm afraid this may present them an opportunity.
Yeah. Thanks so much for watching. Just go to joinnn.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.